In case you haven't noticed, this is actually my first video in over a month. And I do quickly want to apologize for this, but I kind of had to. I was busy doing my A-level exam, so I had to take a step back from making videos to put my time into revising for them. But while I was away from this channel, I found myself genuinely bored. I couldn't spend time doing something that I genuinely love doing, which is making these videos. My time was diverted to revising rather than doing something that I'm genuinely passionate about. But during that time, it got me thinking, how and why do musicians take such long breaks away from making music? They're clearly passionate about making music. That's the reason why they have this job. Yet so many of them take such long breaks away from their passion. And us fans are very quick to label those artists as lazy. So to me, there was no positive reason for taking a step back from making music. However, after looking into it, I've noticed that the ability to be silent is just as important as being able to make the music itself. Now, this may seem a little bit confusing. Why is it important to not do anything? And that's the reason I'm making this video, to show you guys the art of silence in the music industry. Silence can be a very good and positive thing for an artist when done correctly. So today I thought I'd show you when it's good, when it's bad, and how an artist can do this effectively. So as I mentioned, sometimes it's necessary and a positive for artists to take a step back from their art. And for me, the most obvious reason for this is retirement. As much as it may anger us fans, it is better for artists to take a step back when they have done all they can do creatively. The best comparison I can think of to show this is between Kanye and Jay-Z. Now, I'm going to do my best to separate the art from the artist here. I'm only going to speak about the projects they've made and not their personal controversies, as that's a topic for another video. Anyway, Jay-Z has practically fully retired now. He hasn't released an album since 2017 with 444 and only recently performed for the first time in years on Beyonce's Cowboy Carter tour. He's ultimately chose to leave on a high and at the very top of his game, as I believe 444 to be the top 3 in his discography minimum. Now, on the other hand, Kanye has released 3 albums in the past 2 years, with a 4th one looking like it's on its way with Bully. And maybe that'd be okay if these were genuinely good projects, but ultimately they're not. The questionable lyrics and unfinished production makes both Vultures 1 and 2 as well as Donda 2, some of Kanye's worst projects. Now, don't get me wrong, I actually quite like Vultures 1, and I do believe it's quite hated, but compared to Kanye's past albums and the discography he already had, it does not compare to that. So therefore, these past 3 projects, and potentially the next one we're going to get, are tainting the almost perfect discography that Kanye once had. A more recent example of an artist that really should retire is Lil Wayne, unfortunately. Now, don't get me wrong, I think he is incredible, and in the past, he has produced some of the best albums ever. However, I think we can all agree that the Carter 6 just shouldn't exist. That album was genuinely awful. Therefore, I believe it would be better if Lil Wayne took a permanent step back and chose to be silent rather than releasing just pointless and shit albums. So sometimes artists should stay silent permanently because they've done all they can. However, what about active artists? When can they use silence? Well, silence helps build anticipation for their projects. Imagine if your favorite artist dropped a new album every 6 months. Now, at first, you might think that this is great as you get more music for them, more stuff to put in your playlist and more stuff to listen to. However, it ultimately means that they'd spend less time working on the project. In music, silence essentially tells the listener that the artist has spent a lot of time and effort making it, and therefore there's a high likelihood that it's going to be better. Don't get me wrong, this isn't always right. Artists can spend years on a project and it be utter shit. But the best example that I can think of silence showing quality is with Tyler, the Creator. Tyler used to drop a new album every 2 years. Don't get me wrong, this was a very good amount of time for him to create incredible albums like Flower Boy, Igor, and Call Me If You Get Lost. But as his projects got more complex, the time it took to make them increased as well. There was a 3-year gap between Call Me If You Get Lost and Chromacopia if you don't count the estate sale. And this made me personally way more excited for Chromacopia. That extra year showed me that more time, effort and passion went into it. And I believe that an argument could be made for Chromacopia being Tyler's best album. That extra year of silence helped build more anticipation for the next project for Tyler. This is why it angers me when fans get angry after a few months of silence from their favorite artists. What fans need to understand is without that silence, the projects they receive will be considerably worse. Good projects take a hell of a lot of time and effort to make, so obviously artists are going to be quiet whilst they work on it. Also, time is definitely needed between projects. If an artist drops projects too close together, people will be considerably less excited for the second one. A key example of this could be seen last year with We Don't Trust You and We Still Don't Trust You from Future and Metro Boomin. The hype for We Don't Trust You fell off the charts, whereas there was little to no hype for We Still Don't Trust You. And it also appeared to harm the quality of the albums as well. We Don't Trust You was Grammy nominated, whereas We Still Don't Trust You just came and went with just a few good songs on it. This is more proof that taking time between projects is necessary for quality. So next time your favorite artist is being a bit quiet and you're wondering when you're going to get a project, just be a bit more patient. However, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes being silent and taking a step back from music can actually be a negative for both fans and the artist. Now, this can occur when an artist takes too long of a step back. But then that raises the question, how long is too long? Well, that ultimately depends on the artist and the music they make. If someone makes deep, introspective albums, then a long break may be necessary. But should it take 4 years for a trap or drill album? Probably not. But there are some interesting cases that I do want to talk about, the main one being Frank Ocean. He makes some of the most complex and deep projects we've seen. However, it's been almost a decade since his last album. That raises the question of whether or not it's been too long. And I think to answer that, we must look at his previous albums. There was just 4 years between Channel Orange and Blonde. 2 incredible projects in their own right. So this shows that he can make a very good project in just 4 years. So I think it's safe to say that 9 years is just a little too long. And while Frank has been busy with projects away from music, I think he's trying to make a film or something like that, fans are now starting to grow frustrated. Every time there's a new Frank Ocean leak, fans don't even seem to be excited anymore. We expect the disappointment, and now we're just a bit angry with Frank. When you wait too long, that anticipation can grow to become frustration very easily, and I think that is what is happening with Frank Ocean. The important thing is to thread the needle between thorough work and laziness. I also believe that the artist's reputation can determine how long a fan base is willing to wait. One example of this is with Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers by Kendrick Lamar, an album that I've spoken my praises about many times before and will continuously do in the future. There was 5 years of silence between Damn and Mr. Morale, yet there was no anger or frustration amongst fans. I think the main reason was because it was Kendrick Lamar. He had released 3 of the greatest rap albums beforehand with Good Kid, Mad City, To Pimp a Butterfly, and Damn. So I think fans were more confident in knowing that the 5-year break would be worth it. Nobody wanted to rush Kendrick to get the project out as they knew he would be thorough and very, very good with his next album. However, another artist on the other side of the spectrum is Baby Keem. He's only released 3 albums and only one that I would consider a classic in The Melodic Blow. However, he's been silent since that release, and it's now been nearly half a decade since he's released an album. Now that raises the question of, has it been too long for him? Well, fans don't appear to be frustrated with him yet, and I think maybe that's because The Melodic Blow was so good. But I do believe he's treading on thin ice with how much longer he can be silent. He doesn't have the reputation that his cousin Kendrick does have, and if his next album isn't to the standard of The Melodic Blow, people will be very, very angry. The final aspect that can cause an artist's silence to become a negative is false promises. When an artist chooses to break their silence, they may promise a new project with a release date set. However, if this date gets pushed back and the length of the silence is increased, frustration can grow amongst fan bases. And honestly, rightfully so. This has been my pet peeve in the rap community and the rap world for a while now, because I personally can't think of a logical reason why an album that was previously promised for a set date can be pushed back for over a year. And sadly, this is becoming more and more common recently. A$AP Rocky was supposed to release Don't Be Dumb at the start of the year. Playboi Carti kept pushing back the release of I Am Music, and we're still waiting for Vultures 3 that was promised by April last year. Pushing the release dates back increases the silence period, increases the frustration amongst fans, and decreases the anticipation. So an artist's silence can often lead to negative repercussions, and it's happening a lot more recently. So let's now answer the question. is silence good in the music industry? Well, the annoying answer is that it depends. Sometimes silence is necessary, whether this be due to an artist's retirement or the project the artist is making. However, silence is ultimately just as much an art form as the actual process of making music. Everything else in the entertainment sector is oversaturated and flooded with so many unnecessary products. For example, there's a new Madden game every year, a new NBA, a new FIFA. There's just too much. So sometimes being short and sweet and concise with what you do and say is for the best. Sometimes less is more. However, the key word is sometimes. Don't get me wrong, a lot of the times fans will appreciate your projects more due to the time that you take in between. But it is a very fragile path to take. If an artist is dishonest or takes too long to break the silence, this could break the trust between them and the fans and turn them against them. This could ultimately harm their reputation and the success of their projects. Due to social media, we now know everything about celebrities and artists, so being silent is now a very useful tool. However, if you overuse it or be dishonest, then you've used it wrong.